speaking of famous alumni, John Harvard went to Emmanuel.
Exactly.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, how did I, from a village in Romania, end up in the same college with John Harvard?
Hi, everyone. This is the Oxford and Cambridge Project, the podcast that aims to make Oxbridge accessible by lifting the veil on the secrets of two of the most prestigious universities in the world. I'm Opportune Simon. Today we have Simina Dragoș with us. Simina is currently a PhD researcher at Cambridge University, interested in research for social justice, particularly looking at anti-Roma racism in her home country of Romania. She graduated with a Bachelor's of Education from Emmanuel College in 2019 and a Master in Philosophy in Education, Globalization and International Development from Fitzwilliam College in 2020. Simina grew up in Romania, where she studied at a state school until she moved to the UK for her university studies. She has dedicated her university years to improving education near and far by serving, for example, as president of the Cambridge Education Society, also serving as an undergraduate representative on the Education Faculty Board, and also by working in a research initiative improving monitoring processes in Tanzania. She now teaches as a supervisor for the education faculty, along doing her PhD thesis. Hi, Simina.
Hi.
It's so nice to have you on. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. One thing that really interests me is your background and how you actually achieved going to Cambridge against, all odds. So I'd be really happy if you could talk us through your background, high school life, and your goal of coming to Cambridge, if it was ever a goal.
Well, I think, going to Cambridge, you kind of have to make it a goal because it's such an intensive application process that it doesn't just happen. So obviously, like everyone else, I kind of wanted to Cambridge and was thinking about it. But it came really late in my high school time that I started thinking that Cambridge was an option. So I think, in Romania, we have a 12th grade like a 12th grade system. So in 11th grade in the summer, I kind of thought, okay, maybe I should apply to Cambridge as well. And I was lucky that I knew a guy from a school in my hometown who had been to Cambridge, and he had spoken to me about it, but not in very much detail, and he wasn't doing education. So yeah, actually, I went to a state school, and no one else in my school had ever been to Oxbridge before, and no one else since has been to Oxbridge. So there weren't a lot of people around who could help me with the application process, but I was lucky enough that my parents really believed in me and my ability to potentially go to Cambridge. So they actually hired someone to help me with my application process, like an educational consulting organization, I suppose you could call it that. But really, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I had no idea what a college was or what to expect from the interview process and so on. And I suppose we can talk about that later. But, I had pretty good grades in high school. And I was really involved in the school students council, both locally and nationally. I had done a year abroad in Germany. I was performing really well in German, which ended up being part of my undergraduate. Um, and yeah, I was kind of just doing loads of extracurriculars and really interested in certain things. For example, in child psychology, which is why I wanted to come to Cambridge to study child psychology, which never happened, by the way, but that was my interest in 11th grade. Um, and yeah, I mean, I never did extracurriculars with the purpose of going to Cambridge. I just did them because I liked being busy and I was interested in a lot of things. But yeah, I ended up being successful, and I mean, it was incredible. It was, yeah, I couldn't believe it. No one could believe it. And then I got an offer from Emmanuel College, and I ended up missing my offer actually by 1%.
Oh,
So that was interesting.
yeah. Yeah, can you tell us more about that? Did you have to appeal that decision?
No, so well, first of all, I made an open application, which means you don't choose a college chooses you, and Emmanuel College chose me, which I then later found out was pretty lucky because well, just because Emmanuel College is pretty good college and I had a great time.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you get accepted to a UK university, you get a grade offer. And so I had to get 9.5 out of 10 in my final exams, which is called the baccalaureate in Romania. It's a national examination. I didn't take A levels or international baccalaureate. Um, and I took the exams and I came out with 9.4, which is not 9.5.
Mm.
And so I wrote to Emmanuel College and I said, I couldn't get 9.5. What happens now? And this happened in July, early July, because Romanian exams are a bit earlier. And they were like, well, we're going to have to wait until August and see if we can offer you a place or not. And so over the summer, I was kind of like, well, what am I doing? What's happening with my life?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, everyone was just getting their university sorted and their accommodation, and I just couldn't do it because I was waiting. And so finally in August, I had been to a Sia concert before in Bucharest the night before. In the morning at 7 a.m. I get this text and it says you got in. And yeah, that's a very happy day.
That's great. So yeah, they basically just had a feel for who was joining them from other
Yes.
applications, and then decided that they obviously had space for you, and so you could join. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I ended up being the only education student in my year at Emmanuel.
Okay.
So it was just me. Yeah. And I actually in first and second year I studied education with German, not just education, because I mean the education undergraduate changed now, but when I applied you had to choose education and something else, and I was doing education in German.
Right.
I dropped that in third year. I specialized in education. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, again, not to have grades be the be all and end all, you did get a first and you did continue your
Yeah.
master's and your PhD now at Cambridge. So I think it was a good shout
I
from Emmanuel
know.
to get you there. But it's quite funny from your grade story. For me, I wasn't really sure if I would make it either. And I didn't want to have, to miss my grades and then to not have anywhere to go. So I did actually confirm my accommodation at another university in France where I had been accepted. And then,
Oh.
obviously I got the offer from Cambridge. So I was like, I'm not going to refuse this. But yeah,
Yeah.
I was not backing myself at that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, in first year, there was not much backing of myself either. It's tough when you don't come from a background where Cambridge is the normal or Cambridge is something that is expected as an option. It's just, yeah, everything felt kind of strange and out of reach and sort of, I just felt like I was floating around, not really on the surface, but below the surface at all points.
Yeah.
And so I got a first in every year I was at Emmanuel. But
Wow.
it was such a surprise, at first year I was like, what? They gave me a first?
That's amazing. And I want to come back to this and like your revision process and all of that just a little bit later, but let's
Yeah.
go back to the beginning. And
Yes.
can you tell us more, well, about your application process, but also what was the decision for you to study education? Why that over other topics?
Well, for many reasons. I mean, the education undergraduate is really a fantastic degree because you can do very many different topics all under the education undergraduate. So in my first year, I did history, I did philosophy, I did psychology, I did language and literacy studies, I did sociology. So, and then you have this very broad sort of background that you start with, and then you narrow it down. I mean, it's a bit different now because the tripos changed. Tripos is the Cambridge term for BA. Um, it changed a bit, and you don't have the same broad background. But for me, that's what really attracted me to the degree. And then also, as I said, I wanted to be a child psychologist. So I had volunteered for years working with children with autism and the Down syndrome. And I really wanted to do that for a living. And then I got to Cambridge thinking I would specialize in child psychology and, become a therapist after my undergraduate, but that didn't happen ever. I just became really interested in sociology and sort of issues of global justice and things like that. And yeah, academic psychology was not really my thing. It's a difficult subject. Let's put it that way.
I think that's fair enough. I think a lot of, well, I certainly don't realize, and I don't know whether a lot of people realize that Cambridge and Oxford are great universities if you actually want to become an academic, but they're not. They're not really forming you on real life jobs. They're a great degree to have to then go on to do whatever job you want. But they really accentuate that academia part. So if you don't want to be an academic, it's you have to still roll with it for a few years. But I mean, you are an academic now, aren't you?
Well, a baby one maybe.
Right.
Well, I'm a PhD student and I just started, right? So I started my PhD in October. But I would agree that the Cambridge and Oxford kind of education is one that gears you towards a very specific kind of thinking and a very specific kind of writing. It's not the most inclusive way of teaching and learning, I would say, in the sense of it doesn't prepare you to do a job and be pragmatic about things. It prepares you to overcomplicate and criticize everything around you, which I mean, I love it. I do it for a living now. But I can see how it can also be a disappointment if you just, as I wanted in 12th grade and 11th grade to be a child psychologist, that wasn't really necessarily gonna happen.
Yeah. So coming back to your application process, your interview, I saw you thought that the Cambridge application process was great because it had an interview. So what do you meant by that?
Yeah, so what I meant by that is that I felt like it allowed me to expose my potential in a way that written forms of application didn't. Because, well, first of all, English was not my first language. It's actually my third language. So, well, it was at the time. I would now consider it my second language. But that, at the time, English was my third language. I had never been to the UK before. I only learned English through school. So, in a way, I felt like in writing, I wasn't able to convey everything about myself or my potential entirely. But then in the interview process, I was lucky enough to be interviewed by two really amazing academics in education who just had a conversation with me, but a type of conversation that allowed me to really express my thought process and my abilities for critical thinking. And I only realized this now. I didn't realize it at the time. I was just saying what I was thinking at the time. But looking back at what the discussion was about and sort of how it progressed, I thought that interview is what really got me in, because the application process at the time when I applied was sending obviously your personal statement and letters of recommendation, but it was also sending two essays. I had to send one for education and one for German.
Right.
I don't know if that's still the same now, or there's other sort of tasks that you need to do for the application or exams maybe. But I felt that I was really able to convey who I was and sort of my potential in the interview. I also had a very scary interview for German that I think I completely bombed. I think that was bad.
Why did you bomb it?
I don't know. It was such a classical Cambridge academic setting. Like, it was so intimidating, and I was just not prepared. I didn't speak to anyone about the interview beforehand, like after I came to Cambridge as an undergrad, I found out that many people actually prepare themselves for the interview and do mock interviews like that.
Yeah.
I thought you just kind of show up, So to say the least, I was just a bit unprepared for the expectations. But I think really what got me in is probably the interview with the education people. Yeah.
Nice. What was it like in your first few weeks? I guess you were, as you said, you were a bit unprepared for the interview. Did you feel that way about your first few weeks at Cambridge as well?
Oh, absolutely. My first few weeks, my first few terms. Absolutely. I think everyone when they go to university, it's a big change, right? Like I was 19 at the time. You're pretty young and you get to live on your own and you have to sort out all of these things for yourself. But then for me, it was a country where, I had never been to before, apart from the interview, which I've been to Cambridge for 3 days for the interview.
Mm.
Um, I came by myself, like without my parents, and basically a suitcase, and then I had to start a new life. I mean, it's pretty intimidating in itself. But then I had a language struggle for sure. So I would say the first 2 months maybe I found it sometimes hard to follow in lectures, like what was actually being said, and to take notes properly because I was just concentrating so much on understanding the language. And everyone who kind of has lived in a country whose language is not their first language will know that listening to a foreign language for a prolonged period of time is really tiring. So I was very tired all the time. Well, I mean, I was very tired all the time my whole 3 years, but
Isn't everyone?
yeah,
I have to
exactly. I
agree.
think I think that's one of the the main things that you feel at Cambridge is fatigue and
Yeah.
exhaustion. Um, but yeah, it was confusing. It was intimidating. The formals were just like I was like, why am I here? It was so pretty, and I just felt so grateful and honored to be there. But at the same time, I did feel all the time like I wasn't really fully part of the picture. That something about me was not authentically Cambridge, whatever that might mean. I don't know what that means.
Mm.
Now I changed to a college where I would never feel that because it's just a different vibe. But Emmanuel is a very traditional college, and in its uh, aspect and its procedures are formal and so on. So yeah, it was a mix of feeling incredibly grateful and intimidated and a bit like an imposter. Yeah.
Yeah, imposter syndrome, I feel like it's something we as a well, I feel like every college has their own talk about it with freshers that arrive every year. But for us, we were at an all-female college,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they just had, they had sat us down, had a talk saying, this is what imposter syndrome is like. You're gonna believe that you're not meant to be here, even though you've worked as hard as everyone else to be here, and also probably harder because you're women, and we're not going to say that this society is 100% equal. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like imposter syndrome would definitely like throw more exhaustion at you, and also anxiety and all that
Yeah.
stuff, among all the other things that you were feeling.
There were definitely pockets of happiness in the whole sort of confusion and anxiety. I had really great friends, and that was a plus. I made great friends with the people I lived with from the beginning. And eventually, I reached out to the college counselor as well,
Mm-hmm.
um, because after first term, I didn't really want to come back because I was like, there's no way I'm doing this. Like, it just
Wow.
doesn't feel feasible. But then, because so many people in my community and my school and sort of my family were looking after me and thinking, this girl's doing something that no one else has done before, I didn't feel like I could say I'm not going back. But
Yeah.
to be completely vulnerable and honest, like my whole way from my house to the airport, after first term, I just cried the whole time. I was like, I can't believe I'm going back there. Like it has just become a place of like, yeah, it was scary. It was very
Yeah.
scary. And then I started doing better in second term academically. And I mean, I was working incredibly hard. Like my studies were always my priority, and I was spending most of my time with my studies
Mm.
in every year. And doing better is kind of what helped me, to be honest. Like I gained a bit of confidence, and once I gained confidence, I started raising my hand in class and like speaking in class and so on. But that was in second year mostly. Um, And yeah, after I got the first, I was like, okay, so what I'm doing is right.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I think it's really, I mean, it's so inspiring to have that. I wish I had had the guts to like go to reach out to someone, and
Mm.
they provide you with a director of studies, with a tutor. I never actually like had that relationship with those. I saw them as so senior and so like
Yeah.
unworthy. Well, I was unworthy of their
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
that I never really reached out, and I really wish I had. So I'm glad that you did, and I'm glad that you stuck through it. And definitely, I think confidence and kind of faking it till you're making it is
Yeah.
actually a good advice, because as you said, as soon as you're confident, you're participating, and then everything goes better, like your social life, your
Mhm.
academics. So yeah. And so I just want to go like discuss a bit the education course, because I actually don't know much about it,
Mhm.
and I imagine that it was very practical. But then could you just explain what is the education course at Cambridge?
It's a good question because I don't think many people know about the education course as an option, and not many people know what the education course does. Um, but I loved it. It was completely transformational for me. And the education faculty is the kind of faculty that knows, first of all, how to teach, which not many Cambridge faculties do. And second of all, that students will struggle at some point, and that students come from very different backgrounds, and therefore you can't expect students to already know some things. Because
Yeah.
I heard that a lot from others, that in their faculties they felt kind of like they just expected everyone to have a sort of pre-knowledge that wasn't compatible with coming from a public school, for example.
Yeah.
A state, by public I mean state school, not public as in
Mm.
Eton. And the education course is a course where you look at education and what education can mean from a variety of critical standpoints. So you can think of education as schooling, obviously. Everyone, when they hear education, they might think of education as schooling. But you can
Mhm.
think of informal education as well, right? Like education done in communities, in sort of family settings, um, education through various social movements. Like, for example, what happens with the school strike for the climate now.
Mm.
Those are educational settings as well, because you learn things, you learn how to be an active citizen, you learn how to think about climate change, right? Like, well, the climate crisis. So we think about education in a variety of meanings, like what education can mean, but then also what education is for, and how education works in the social reality. So I specialize mostly in sociology, which is what I do now as well. And there we think, what sort of inequalities affect education? How does education relate to racism, for example? How does education relate to socioeconomic inequalities? What does education look like on a global scale, and why does it look like that on a global scale? For example, why do all schools in the world learn English? That's a
Mm.
colonial, like an imperial legacy. So it's really a very critical course that kind of, in looking at education, is looking at pretty much everything in society, because very many variables influence education. So yeah, if you're curious about the world and how it works, I definitely recommend the course. And you can make it your own. That's the beautiful part about it, because now there are 3 tracks. So you can do education in English and drama, education in international development, or education in psychology. So you can choose one of the tracks and specialize more and look at very uh, real life problems through an academic lens, through a critical lens, and
Yeah.
learn some fun things along the way. Yeah.
I feel like you're really selling me education, and I probably should have done that as a degree. I find it so interesting. And so, what was your favorite part about the course?
I think it was sociology of education. I think, yeah, because I came across for the first time in my life. I mean, when I mean education was transformative as the course for me, it genuinely was. I mean, I came across, for example, Foucault in my second year of education. And I started thinking about like my own sort of so my own sort of indoctrination with discourses in society, right? Like, why do I feel like I need to wear a bra? You know, things like that in my own thinking changed because of my course, because of the theory and the concepts I was coming across in my course. So that's why sociology of education, because social theory I think is really interesting and important in sort of helping us deconstruct our own thinking and kind of think critically about how we've been brought up maybe. And I mean, I come from a very patriarchal society, where I never had these conversations, for example, about gender equality ever before coming to university. I mean, it was a shock, you know, like I found out at university what sexual harassment is or what sexual assault is, and that is not okay. Like it was, I mean, you have to understand it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, no, definitely.
The stuff I learned in sociology of education definitely went with me throughout my life. And well, I mean, it hasn't been so long since I finished my undergrad, but you know, they changed my life and they changed my thinking. It wasn't just a course for me; it was a journey, basically.
Definitely. And so I guess this is why you've kind of decided to continue this journey
Hmm.
on doing your master's and your PhD. Can you tell us more about that? Like, what is your PhD a continuation of your master's?
Hmm. It is in some ways, but not in others. So I did a master's in education, globalization, and international development. It wasn't my favorite. I stayed with the faculty because I wanted to stay with my supervisor. But there's a new master's in the faculty that I think I would have liked more. It was just not available when I applied. So there's a master's in the faculty now called Knowledge, Power, Politics, and Education. And it kind of discusses these ideas of power and knowledge making and, you know, how politics influences education, how education is a political space and so on. So I think that's more towards what my interests are. But with my master's in education, international development, and globalization, I really loved my cohort. So I was part of a master's cohort of really, really, really brilliant people, and I learned so much from them. And many people had actually worked before they came for this master's, so
Right.
they had amazing professional experiences that they were able to share, and I was able to learn so much from them. But the master's at Cambridge is a really short period of time. I mean, it was 9 months, and then we had strikes, we had the pandemic. It was really three
Of
months.
course.
So
Yeah.
3 months of teaching, and then the thesis. And now I'm doing a PhD in kind of sociology and politics of education, and I'm looking at youth activism particularly. Yeah.
Cool. Great. And I mean, I feel like I need to point out that even though you could have enjoyed some other masters better, you did get 82% for your masters. So I feel like that's just a mind-blowing grade for Cambridge. So congrats to you, and you're obviously
Thank you.
doing, something right.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it went really well in the end because I had an amazing supervisor who was able to support me and push me to places I was not aware I could go. Like she was just so amazing. And she still is because she still is my supervisor.
And did you meet her during your bachelor's dissertation?
Yes. Yeah.
What was that? And what did you do? Because I think you also did something really interesting for your like third year dissertation.
Oh yeah, yeah. So my current supervisor taught me sociology of education in my second year of undergrad. And then one of her PhD students at the time, who's now a teaching associate at SOAS, was my supervisor for my third year dissertation, which was on Roma school segregation in Romania. It was an empirical study based on youth resistance to deficit discourses. So how do young people in a segregated school respond to how their teachers construct them as unable to be educated, as you know, troublemakers, as yeah, deficient students. So that's what
Right.
it was looking at. So on the one hand the racism, and on the other hand the resistance of the young people. So I wasn't supervised by my now supervisor, but by one of her then PhD students. Yeah. So we had a sort of, she knew about me for a long time.
Do you have to ask a supervisor before you do a master's application, or how does that go through?
But for the master's, you don't. I applied like thinking about her and having spoken to her because she was the one I knew I wanted to work with. But I actually also applied to Oxford, and I was very close to going to Oxford.
Really?
For
That's
my master.
obviously okay. I have to pick on that because we are called the Oxford and Cambridge Project, and although we're focusing on Cambridge right now, we will be covering all aspects of Oxford in the exact same way that we're doing now with Oxford students.
Okay.
So why the choice to apply and why the choice to stay in Cambridge?
Yeah, so I applied to Oxford because I was kind of thinking in third year, well, what am I doing with my life? I applied to a bunch of US schools as well, and I got into the University of Pennsylvania, and into Oxford. And I applied to Oxford because they had this Masters of Research in Education, so you were learning loads about research methods. And I was hoping that I would get better at statistics because I was really bad at statistics in my third year of undergrad. And I went to visit one day to Oxford. It just wasn't for me. And the education department in Oxford is much smaller, like much, much smaller. They don't have an undergraduate in education. Even the library, like, I mean, that's what stuck with me. The library was so small compared to ours. And I mean, at the education faculty, we have an amazing library and an amazing library team. I said yes to Oxford first. And I was like, yep, I'm going, done with Cambridge, bye bye. And then I went to Oxford and I was like, oh, I don't like it here.
Well, I mean, that's good. You made an informed, choice by going there and seeing that. And I feel like for anyone who's doing their applications now and wondering whether to go for Cambridge or Oxford, instead of, looking at the stats, you should definitely look at the difference in courses between the two universities, because there are some big similarities but big differences. My degree doesn't even exist at Oxford, so
mine neither. My undergrad neither.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's really interesting to know. So we discussed your course and obviously your journey through your undergraduate, master's, and now PhD. Can you tell us about your college experience? So you studied at Emmanuel College for your undergrad, and now you are at Fitzwilliam College for your postgrad. Can you, first of all, let's start with Emmanuel. Could you describe the college for someone who's, like you before, never gone to Cambridge and doesn't really know what Emma is?
Okay, so I'll start with the location. Emmanuel is one of the first colleges you see when you come from the train station because, well, the first one is Downing on the left-hand side, but then the next one is Emmanuel. So it's just opposite kind of the Wetherspoons, which if you're an international student, you won't know what that is. But if you're a British student, you absolutely will know. The Wetherspoons is a social institution in the UK. Problematic at times, but still. Yeah, so Emmanuel is close to the city center. It's an old college. It was founded in 1584, I think. It was also the Wi-Fi password for some of the college Wi-Fi. That's why I know it. Whenever I go back to Emmanuel, my heart kind of has this sort of feeling of this is home in a way, and it does become home because you spend a lot of time there, and I had my friends there, and I made some of my best friends, for life in Emmanuel.
And it's such a beautiful college as well. Like the grounds are just all the photos you generally see of Cambridge. There's probably always going to be one of Emmanuel showing up, and I think I'm correct in saying that the grounds for Emmanuel gave the inspiration to create Harvard in Boston.
Yes, that's exactly true. Speaking of famous alumni, John Harvard went to Emmanuel.
Exactly.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, how did I, from a village in Romania, end up in the same college with John Harvard?
Again, we're on to backing ourselves in this podcast, okay? So you deserve your place here, and you can be compared to Harvard, the guy, not the uni. It's amazing.
Yeah, so yeah, Emmanuel and Harvard have a very close relationship because of that. Emmanuel also has an outdoor pool, if that's of interest, which is really cool. And it has a beautiful pond and like a big sort of like field in the middle of the college. And it's crazy because you're in the middle of the town, but you don't hear anything. It's such a calm place, such a beautiful place. And in the Emmanuel Library, I mean, I spent many nights in the Emmanuel Library, but it's so beautiful. It has an old part and a new part, and the hall is really nice as well. The dining hall. It has this beautiful baby blue color on the walls, and in the informal, like candlelit formal, is just incredible. The light with the walls and the paintings, and it has a great choir as well. So yeah, it was nice. It was also tough in some senses because um, whilst it is called a friendly college, it didn't always feel like that.
Mm.
And wherever you put like loads of young people to live together, there is going to be some drama and tension for sure. And I think probably that's something that happens in every college. But I will say I have like immense love for the porters at Emmanuel. They were so good about being welfare support during my time at Cambridge. And my tutor, well, I had two tutors, but both of them were really great. Yeah, and the master, oh my God, the master, Dame Fiona Reynolds, she's so amazing. And she was so good about being around the students and being a real sort of warm presence in the college. And I sat next to her at my graduation dinner. Yeah, my graduation dinner and
Mm-hmm.
at scholars dinner, which scholars dinner is a dinner you get when you get a first. Um, and had amazing conversations with her. And then I was part of the boat club as well. And the Emmanuel
Right.
Boat Club is a big presence on the river, and it has amazing coaches. Pete and Mary coach it. Yeah, so I was pretty involved in college life. I was actually also part of the EXU, which is the Emmanuel College Students Union. So I organized like social events. I had some like battle with the college about not charging extra rent for International Freshers Week, because for Freshers Week they don't charge rent. It's just included in the term rent, right? It's not extra.
Right.
Um,
I'm pretty sure that differs for some colleges because I'm sure. Well, I seem to recall that I definitely paid for my extra nights arriving earlier for International Freshers Week, but hey.
yeah. So we had that at Emmanuel as well, but then during my tenure we changed it.
Nice. That's great.
Policy win. No, I mean it was the president at the time. She was really great, and she helped me do that. And yeah, there were various other like sort of problems around college that we resolved as a committee. Um, but it was fun because you get to be involved in college and kind of take part in the discussions. And so yeah, I was involved. I can't say I didn't have a good time. I did have a great time. It just felt like it was very yeah. It was. I don't want to say conservative because it wasn't that conservative. It was just like old English kind of private schooly.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I feel like conservative is fine to say. Like, most old colleges at Cambridge will have that vibe because people who know about Oxbridge and want to make it their life's work to get there will want to go in those colleges because that's what they know. So
Yeah,
you often get your groups that have more that vibe, but you can also have your groups that are totally different, especially with having
yeah,
conversation like these. Like, for example, cancelling rent for extra nights will probably mean that a lot of international people will want to apply to Emma. So maybe
mm.
you're changing things, and in like 5 years'
Oh,
time, it'll be super modern, super forward thinking. Who knows? So having those
yeah,
conversations, obviously, I mean, I don't want to toot the podcast horn too much, but it's important.
yeah.
And yeah, so you decided to then go on to Fitzwilliam for your
Yes,
master's. Did you have to just state that on the application process?
I did. Yeah, because I was also applying to. I mean, full disclosure here. I was applying to a scholarship at Fitzwilliam for my
Okay.
master's. And one of the conditions was that Fitzwilliam was my college that I wanted to go to. So it had to be on my application. And at the time I was kind of like, oh, I'm leaving Emma. But then once I left Emma, I was like, oh, that was a good choice. And Fitzwilliam is a fantastic college. I am so in love with it. If you go on my Twitter, like I just like tweet about Fitzwilliam every now and then. And I love it so much because it is completely aligned with my politics. It is a very inclusive college in terms of its state school intake, in terms of the diversity in ethnic backgrounds that people come from to Fitzwilliam College. It has a very big graduate community, and obviously I'm a graduate student, so that's what was interesting for me.
Yeah.
I think it has the biggest graduate community in Cambridge, but I'm not 100% sure. It has a beautiful new MCR building, and MCR is just like the organization or the graduate student community, basically. Um, and it's very humane towards its students. So, for example, for lockdown, Fitzwilliam didn't make anyone leave. They were like, if this is your home and if you want to stay here, you stay here. You just tell us, you know? So that, for me, that meant a lot because I didn't want to leave Cambridge. I couldn't leave Cambridge. Cambridge is my primary home. And I felt seen, you know? I felt respected. I felt like the college was trusting me. And throughout like this whole coronavirus like pandemic, and all of their communications are just so considerate and so trusting towards the students, I feel. Um, so yeah. For example, last night when the prime minister announced lockdown, just like maybe 50 minutes later, we already had an email from college saying, don't worry, we are here for you, you know, and that means a lot because it feels like it can be your home. So yeah.
That's great. I mean, I also have fond memories of Fitz because my director of studies was actually linked to Fitzwilliam, Emily's, and she was amazing. So yeah.
Yeah.
And could you describe then, I guess, more, Fitzwilliam to someone who's never been to Cambridge? How
Okay.
different is it to, Emma, but also all the different colleges?
Yes. So Fitzwilliam is one of the newer colleges. I think it became part of the university in the 20th century, sometime half mid 20th century maybe. But it's been a college before. It's been a house before that. So Fitzwilliam College started as Fitzwilliam House, and it was opposite the Fitzwilliam Museum. So if you go on the street where the Fitzwilliam Museum is, there's a house at some point that says this used to be Fitzwilliam House, that is now Fitzwilliam College or something like that.
Wow.
And it was opened up as a place for people who were not extremely wealthy and not Protestant, I think, to come to Cambridge as well. So people who were not the traditional Cambridge person to be able to come to the university and learn on lower fees.
Cool.
So that's how it developed. And then the grounds where it is now, that was in the 19th century, so 18 something. The grounds where Fitzwilliam College is now, which is on Huntington Road, after your college, Mary Edwards College, up the hill, as you would say in Cambridge. It's one of the hill colleges. That was where Charles Darwin's wife, Emma Darwin, used to live in what is now called the Grove, which is part of the MCR and also has some administrative offices. That was her house. And she donated the grounds around her house to Fitzwilliam House, which then became Fitzwilliam College. So it's a newer college architecturally because it has this unique history in Cambridge. And because it only became a college in the 20th century, the grounds of the college are actually quite new. So they're 1960s kind of architecture. The hall is very beautiful, the dining hall. It's very tall and it has this huge window. So there's always beautiful sunlight in the hall. And it has a nice cafe. It has an amazing library. And beautiful college grounds because we have actually an amazing gardener team who take care of the grounds. At the moment, there's plenty of pumpkins around in the Fitzwilliam garden, and you can I think they plant groceries as well. You can plant groceries, I think, as a student in college as well. And beautiful old trees that you can see from the library. So it's really nice right now, like very colorful leaves. Um, it is a hedgehog sanctuary,
Right.
which is very cute, and it has a little like hedgehog sort of corner. Um, yeah, and its mascot is a goat. Isn't that amazing?
A
Yeah.
very nature-oriented college, one would say.
Yes.
Yeah, Fitz, I guess, yeah. Again, I have a fondness for Fitz because of the three Hill colleges, well, I say three, but there's more, but the three classic
Yeah.
ones, Murray Edwards, Fitzwilliam, and Churchill, if you live there, you probably have not only the community of your own college, but also the community of the neighbor colleges. So
Yeah.
you have three colleges in one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to know how different is life as an undergraduate versus a postgraduate at a college? Are you living within college right now?
No, I live in private accommodation, and that's for personal reasons. I mean, college did offer me a room, which is very nice, and I almost took it, but I mean, I have a partner, and it's just more complicated.
Yep.
It's the life as a postgraduate is very different from the undergraduate is just so intensive, and you end up working such hectic hours that I mean, I never had weekends or like evenings off. That was not a thing that I, mainly because I was a bit like chaotic in my scheduling. And because, with rowing, sometimes I would take a nap after rowing, things like that. But first of all, you feel like an adult because you can have evenings off, you can have weekends off. The work is not as intensive anymore. As a PhD student, yeah, it kind of gets crazy again. But as a master's student, at least, I had to do one essay per term compared to like 12.
Yeah.
Not to scare you, but it's a bit intensive, the workload. Um, and the social life is different. Everyone is an adult and is behaving like an adult rather than like a high school student. Some people have, families and children and postgraduate studies. And so the vibe is a bit more,
More mature.
yeah, it's much more mature. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. And there's some distance from the college because I don't live on college housing now. In
Mm-hmm.
my master's I lived in a college house, but it was not on site, so it still felt like I had a distance, and I like that. But now that I live in like my private accommodation, it's just like I go to college when I want to. Well, I know I won't be able to probably that much in lockdown, but
Yeah.
I can participate in formals and gatherings when I want to, but I still have a distance and can keep alive. So I would say postgrad life is very, very different, much more enjoyable.
Yeah. And I was gonna ask, like, I guess you kind of touched upon it with the like your tactical nap after a rowing session, in the middle of the day. What was your balance? I guess more as an undergrad, because as a postgrad you have more balance. What was your balance as between, the triangle of like studying, socializing, sleeping?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit chaotic, isn't it? Like it just gets chaotic for everybody at undergrad. I did rowing, so that was good because I did exercise almost every day, which kept me going outside and doing something else.
So it was quite.
Uh,
If you were doing rowing every day, were you in like W1 in like the
no,
first
I was
grad
in
or
W2, but
quite
in
intense?
yeah, yeah, I wasn't on the river every day, but you have ergs and like gym sessions as well. Um, and when I didn't have something to do with rowing, yeah, I had other like fun things going. Like I was a president of a society. I did some ballroom dancing at some point, like randomly, like with the town sort of. It wasn't
Cool.
a students thing. It was a town thing. Um, and meeting friends and always going out for coffees or seeing people for dinner and so on. So I had to be very strict with my scheduling. I mean, I sound chaotic, but I was actually incredibly good at planning my essay. So at the beginning of term, I would plan my entire term, and I would set deadlines for myself at the beginning of term when I would have the essays, when I would need to have the essays done by. So I knew, for example, oh, I need to write 2 essays this term for sociology of education. At the beginning of term, I would put one in week 3 and one in week 4. And to create a system of accountability, I would email my supervisors and be like, I'm going to send you an essay on this date. And I would do all of this before the term started. So in the week 0, kind of after you get back. And I did this for every single term.
Okay, that is definitely something that needs to be passed on to other people, because I feel like that is, that's how you nail organization.
Yeah, actually, I can show. I have one. Let me just get something.
Yeah.
It's a bit more difficult right now because I don't have deadlines as strict and I don't work in the same way. But this is just an example of how I used to work. So I used to put the dates on paper.
Right.
Like this.
Yeah.
Write for every day which essay I was going to work for. And I was always kind of maybe 2 days behind schedule. But
I mean, still a great, rhythm.
Everything worked out. Yeah, everything worked out because I was very anxious most of the time. So I had to have an overview of how I'm going to deal with everything. And that's what helped me going. And I would say this is a great technique for revision. In revision, I always knew I will have enough days to go through everything in the revision term, which is the third term, because I planned it at the beginning. And so like that doesn't work as well with postgrad because there's less kind of structure to how many things you need to get done, and you might need to, branch out your reading. But when you have very clear tasks, like write this essay on this topic for this paper, then that works out. Yeah. So, I sound chaotic, but I was actually organized in my chaos.
Going back to your academic achievements and obviously this organization, how do you get a first? How did you go that extra mile to, get this grade, which obviously you need to kind of fight for in your exam. You need to do that much more than other people.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think I kind of had to figure it out by myself because no one really tells you how to revise and how to study, or at least no one told me. And so my technique has always been to think ahead. So in the terms, when I would prepare for essays, I would keep very detailed notes of my reading, of what I read, so that in revision term, I wouldn't have to go back to those articles or those books, but I had detailed notes that I could follow and I could understand what was going on. So that was one thing that I did throughout the year. And then in revision term, I usually work best by creating notes. So, and writing by hand. I would read maybe 2 or 3 more articles on a certain topic to like show that I'm able to go beyond the reading list, because that's one of the things you need to do to get a first. You need to know the reading list or parts of it. You can't always read the entire reading list because sometimes they're incredibly huge. So you need to have some knowledge of the reading list and of the lecture material, but you also need to show that you're able to go beyond that and search for your own reading and show that you have an interest in the topic that you're writing on. So I would go that first. Then I would go through my notes and compress them, like get the main ideas out of them and kind of try to understand a narrative. Like on this topic, say socioeconomic inequalities in schooling, how can I take the main ideas out of what the literature is telling me and put it on paper and make notes? So for every article, I would take out 2 or 3 ideas, and then I would see, or article or book that I was reading. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
And then I would see what are the overarching themes around that topic. And then I would make small, those small revision cards. I would take those small revision cards and put just keywords and key references on those cards and learn them. So there was a bit of rote learning involved as well, because but I don't think that's necessary anymore, actually, because now they don't do exams as we did them, so like in a whole 3 hours on paper. I think now students it's like a take-home exam because of COVID. So if they're keeping at that would be great, because then you don't have to go through the rote learning, but you have to do a bit of rote learning as well to be able to remember the references and the main ideas. And so when I was doing this process of note writing, I would think critically about the literature as well, because that's also one of the things that you have to be able to do. I would suggest all students go to the marking criteria and read the marking criteria before doing revision, because the marking
Definitely.
criteria will tell you what you need to get a first. And one of the things it says is analysis and synthesis. And analysis means being able to be critical about the stuff you read, and synthesis means being able to extract the essence of what you read. So you extract the main idea, the main themes I was saying, but then also think critically about them. What is missing? What could be said more? Did they do the study in the best way they could, you know? How can you make connections between what you read in one paper and what you read in another paper? How can you think like what's the big picture? That's what I think is looked after in a first essay as well, having a sense of the bigger picture. Um, so yeah, that was kind of my revision process. And then I cannot recommend this enough. Write essays in exam conditions. Like prepare yourself for
Yeah.
how an exam condition looks like. For every single exam I had in all my 3 years, I did at least one timed exam beforehand. So I would sit down in the library from 8 a.m. until 11, and I would say, okay, I'm treating this like an exam, no notes, no nothing, just the questions from the year before, and write as much as you can, and as well as you can. And then I would send those essays to my supervisors for a revision supervision. So I wouldn't have a revision supervision until I had done some work. I understood the main ideas, I knew how to critique them, and I had done a timed essay. Like I was very strict about my revision routine, because that's what worked for me, and that's what got me the first that I
Yeah.
got. But yeah, everyone will be different, and everyone has different learning styles. So yeah, make sure you do what's good for you.
Yeah, I definitely think I also could not recommend this enough, and I definitely did not do enough of this. Doing timed essays under all the restrictions that an exam would face. Even for me, it
Mm.
was. I'm an early morning person. I'd prefer to
Mm.
start exams at 7:30 or 8, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't, and I would be so bad at kind of managing my hunger like during exams,
Oh,
because sometimes you
yeah,
finish at like 1:30. So I
yeah,
agree so much with what you just said. And also, I guess it must be funny for you to now be a supervisor for students, for
yeah.
undergrad students. Do you have any tips for like students in supervisions? Because you were obviously
Mm.
one before.
Yeah, so with my students, I share everything. Like what I'm saying now, I tell them everything. I tell them how I did things. Um, and I never have a problem sharing my notes either. If people ask me for my notes on any topic that I studied, I'm happy to give them away. Like I think about knowledge making as a collective thing. I don't want to individualize it. Academia is individualized enough anyway. This is about getting people to think critically about key issues in society, right? So I don't mind sharing ideas and notes. But with my students, I make sure I explain to them very clearly what the marking criteria is and what is actually meant by the words the marking criteria, because sometimes they can seem very vague,
Yeah.
but there are still expectations in the minds of the markers. And so some of the things that are most important in Cambridge undergraduate essays are clarity of expression, which means keep it short, keep it simple, understand exactly what terms you mean, define your terms, and critical engagement, which means challenge the question, challenge the essay question, challenge what you're reading. Even if you're challenging it in the wrong way, just have the courage to do that. Because for a long time, and especially in first year, I was kind of like, well, how am I going to say what these experts are saying is wrong, or how am I going to do it? Because no one can create perfect arguments in journal articles or in books, because you just don't have the space. There's always something missing. And it's not about being mean or being overly critical. It's about expanding the discussion to places that it hasn't gone before. And that's how you advance knowledge. So I think those are two very important things, clarity and criticality, but then also structure. So in my feedback to my students, I go back to the marking criteria and I explain to them clearly how, they could improve what they're doing to that. But then at the same time, I know what it's like. It's sometimes that essay was written between 2 and 4 a.m. And let's be honest here. We've all been there. And I told all my students, it's not the end of the world. Like essay writing is a practice, is something you get better at over time. That's why they make you write so many essays. And it, your welfare comes first. Yeah. I love supervising because it is part of how I express to the institution that I want to make it more open. Because I was the first one in my community and my family to go to Cambridge, or Oxford. Well, yeah, to Oxbridge. It it is extremely important for me that I at all times don't take this for granted. It is a privilege to be in a space of knowledge making, and knowledge in itself has a lot of power in the world. And we've seen that through eugenics. We've seen how, genocides are based on claims of knowledge making and on claims of scientific objectivity and things like that. So knowledge is really a very powerful thing. It is in no way something neutral, and it is in no way something that is apolitical. So I would say it is extremely important to be aware of that. And then in an institution like Cambridge, it is crucial to remember that but in itself, it's an exclusionary place. No institution becomes world leading without excluding certain people. Like that's what Cambridge prides itself on. It only accepts the best, so to speak. I mean, the best is defined in a specific way, right? But that's what they're priding themselves on. And so when we are in those institutions, it is important to remember, like you and your colleagues do, that people don't get here easily, and that we need to make it more easy for people to get here so that knowledge can be more diverse in itself. And this is something, for example, the BME campaign at Cambridge speaks about as well. It matters not only that you get there, but what experience you have there as well. So it doesn't necessarily matter that much that people get in, but also ensuring that people are able to succeed in these environments. And they are still very difficult environments to succeed in. So once you get comfortable, don't forget that it is difficult for people to succeed in this environment, and that it was difficult for you to succeed in this environment as well. And I don't mind sharing my techniques or my notes or my anything with anyone, because it's not so much just about getting people in, but making sure everyone can succeed and everyone is seen for their potential. Like my supervisors in my PhD and master supervisor saw something in me and was able to adapt to my learning style to allow me to go to a higher place of criticality and thinking and knowledge making.
Yeah.
I would love for everyone's supervisor to be like that, but that's not always the case. Cambridge is a great place, but it's not perfect in any way. And some, many people have not a great time here, because it is a very particular kind of place. So yeah.
To wrap this up and look at it through like rose tinted glasses, tell me about your happiest day at Cambridge. Do you remember it? Do you remember what it was?
Yes, and I hope I'm not gonna cry. My absolute happiest day at Cambridge was my graduation day, because it was the day that my family first came to Cambridge. So I was at Cambridge for 3 years, but they were never able to come because of a variety of reasons. And so my parents were here. My sister was there. My sister was here. Two of my good friends from home were here, coming for my graduation. And I had finally made it. And it was like, oh my God, it just felt like this moment of incredible relief. Like I was like, Jesus Christ, I made it. And it's actually in first year, I put this screensaver on my desktop that was saying, relax, you will graduate. And it was there for like 3 years. And finally I was graduating, and it was a sunny, beautiful day. And, once they put, cause you know this, but like, I assume the listeners won't necessarily know it, but you kneel in front of the master, and the master of your college takes your hands, and she says, well, our master was a few of us. So she's saying in Latin, with the power invested me by the fellows in the academy, I welcome you in the rounds of the academy, basically, or in the space of the academy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there you are, you have a bachelor's and you get the certificate. And when I got the certificate, I just broke down. Like, I was crying. And the porter was like, he was so sweet. She was like, don't cry, like, you've made it. It's always going to be here for you to come back. And then you go from Senate House through this like sort of tent where they try to sell you merchandise. And then your family's there and they like hug you and you take loads of pictures. And then we went back to college and had an awesome lunch. And the master came to speak to my parents. And yeah, she was talking to my parents about like, you know, my involvement in college and stuff. And it was just so beautiful. And my parents were so happy to be there. And then we went punting afterwards and we had a really nice dinner as well. So yeah, it was easily one of the happiest days of my life.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty perfect. And to have a sunny graduation is also a great thing at Cambridge that not everyone has, because we're still in the UK and it's still very rainy. But no, I feel like you just captured it brilliantly. So thanks so much, Simina.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me to be on this wonderful podcast, and good luck to everyone preparing to apply. And, you know, feel free to reach out to the faculties for information on how to apply, and go to the education faculty website and look at our brilliant courses.
Good plug there.
Yeah.
I just might add, for any listeners out there, please, like and subscribe and share the podcast, because it would help other people find it.